Good afternoon. I'm Rick Wade, Senior Vice President for Strategic Alliances and Outreach here at the United States Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important forum on accelerating impact for women-owned businesses. Some 2 years ago, we launched the Equality of Opportunity Initiative, designed to advance both public and private sector solutions to help close America's opportunity gaps. This conversation today is both timely and important as we celebrate Women's History Month and the accomplishments of extraordinary women entrepreneurs and leaders in business. It's important that we help tell their stories, share their experiences, and support their growth and success in even bigger ways. Today, we'll share valuable information and resources and highlight innovative ways to strengthen the women-owned business ecosystem. As I've said many, many times before, it's not just a moral imperative, the right thing to do, but this is a matter of America's economic competitiveness. Women-owned businesses are job creators, and they're also very important anchors in our communities and society. The American Express 2018 State of Women-Owned Business report tells us that women-owned business enterprises grew an impressive 58% from 2007 to 2018. And the number of firms owned by Black women grew by a stunning 164%, nearly 3 times that rate. But inasmuch as women entrepreneurs have become more established and made progress, and progress we've made, they still face obstacles. The good news is that we have an opportunity to remove many of those obstacles through intentional investments, helping them access the capital and contracts that they need, through mentorship and sponsorship, and creating the supportive business networks and relationships that are so critical to business success. We're excited to hear from today's speakers who will shed light on these and other issues and discuss how the public and the private sectors, business and government, are working together to ensure equality of opportunity for the business women of today and paving the way for young women entrepreneurs of tomorrow. I want to thank you for joining us for this very, very important discussion. Let's get going, and please join me in welcoming Latricia Boone, Vice President of our Equality of Opportunity Initiative here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Rick. I'm Latricia Boone, Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Equality of Opportunity Initiative, and I'm honored to invite our next speaker, who is a dynamic woman leader, entrepreneur, and public servant. Ms. Natalie Madeira Cofield serves as the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Women's Business Ownership at the Small Business Administration, where she is responsible for executing oversight, management, leadership, and championship of female entrepreneurship. In this role, she has already overseen the largest expansion of women's business center network in the history of the SBA. Ms. Cofield is a seasoned entrepreneur in her own right, and she's led state and local economic development programs to successfully incubate and scale small business in communities throughout the country. And most recently, before joining SBA, she served as founder and CEO of Walker's Legacy and the Walker's Legacy Foundation, which provides entrepreneurship programming to support thousands of multicultural women entrepreneurs. Natalie, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me for this conversation. I'm going to jump right in because I know our audience is looking forward to hearing from you and learning from you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Been very busy. It's Women's History Month. So we have been all across the country really just celebrating and championing the fastest growing entrepreneurial segment in the country, women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation for that very reason. I want to kind of start by giving a little bit more context for those who don't know what your office does. I shared a little bit about your work, but can you talk about how you all actually support women in business? For those that are not familiar, what is the role of the Office of Women's Business Ownership, and what have been your top priorities since you've taken helm?
Yes, so that's a great question. So, I'll start with a little bit of the history, right? Because it is Women's History Month. So, in 1972, there were roughly 400,000 women owned small businesses. And today, there are nearly 12.5 million of the 32 million small businesses that the U.S. Small Business Administration has the honor of representing that are started and run by women. In 1988, there was a piece of legislation that was called the Women's Business Ownership Act, which really stood up the Office of Women's Business Ownership. And part of this was also removing any requirement for women to have a male co-signer for any access to financial capital. And for some who are watching today, they may say, oh, I can't believe that that was even something that was required of women to have a male co-signer, while others are thinking to themselves about their mothers or their grandmothers or even possibly themselves and their own experiences with accessing capital, which we all know are kind of the backbones of how you build generational wealth, both through homeownership and through entrepreneurship. And so as we're talking about kind of the championship of entrepreneurship across the country, just seeing that exponential growth of women and really demonstrates the appetite that women had for not only their own self-efficacy and entrepreneurial interests, but also their desire to take care of their community, their homes, and their country. And, I continue to champion and say we're the fastest growing entrepreneurial segment. We can't be forgotten at this point. Women deserve to have an equitable seat at the table. And that's where my office comes in. Since I have had this role, it's been a little over a year. I started on March 1st of 2021. We have managed the largest expansion and undergone the largest expansion in the history of the Small Business Administration of our footprint of women's business centers. We brought on board 24 new women's business centers. And why are we doing this? Again, because we know that women need the resources. They need to be able to go into a space where they have community that can train them, counsel them, and advise them on starting entrepreneurial endeavors. We know the pandemic was disproportionately impacting women. And so as we are talking about rebuilding our national economy, we can't do that without women having what they need to be successful. And that's why I'm excited about at the end of this month, we will be able to say for the first time in history at the U.S. Small Business Administration that we have a women's business center in every state in the United States of America. And while I'm extremely proud of that, I also recognize that it's 2022. And that's why I'm saying, in my role, working under the leadership of Administrator Guzman and her continued championship and support, we're going to keep pushing the needle because we're making up for lost time in some instances. I'm proud of the fact that we'll have a women's business center in every state in the country by 2022, but it shouldn't take us 2022 to get there.
Wow. You just shared a lot and it's a lot to unpack. But one, let me just say the history that you shared, I think was really important because it's not been that long ago that women actually, needed to have a male counterpart
That's
to
right.
to access capital. That's huge. And so historically, to your point, we've made strides and progress is happening, but we've got a lot of time to make up for as well. And also congratulations on your 1 year anniversary. I know for a fact that there's a lot happening under your leadership and expect that a lot more will happen to really support women in business and entrepreneurs. So as you think about the work that you all are doing, I'm going to get a bit more granular, ask you to can you talk about what are those specific tools or resources or programs that you are offering to women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, in Tulsa, the president made an announcement about increasing federal contracting spend with small disadvantaged businesses to 15%, which represents nearly $100 billion in new contracting opportunities. This is a great opportunity for women entrepreneurs to get access to a larger piece of the pie. And so more specifically, a program that can aid them in doing that is the Women-Owned Small Business Certification Program, which is administered through the Small Business Administration. And I'm excited to also share that we have increased the number of industries or NAICS codes that women will be more competitively placed within, to nearly 700 new NAICS codes. So not only do you have an actual program that exists, but you also now have a reform of this program to expand it and to make it more comprehensive and widen the pie of opportunity for women from the contracting and procurement competitiveness perspective to meet the president's commitment to increasing federal contracting spend. And then our women's business centers. So, I mentioned the 24 new women's business centers that we've opened this year in the last 12 months. 60% of them are located in rural communities. We've doubled the number of women's business centers on HBCU campuses. We put out $2.7 million to support women's business centers and creating innovative programs to address the needs of women. For example, when COVID was happening, and even now, we have seen a rise in mobile businesses and mobile support for businesses. So when I mentioned going into the doors of a women's business center, we know that could be entering the door of the center through your computer in your kitchen, or it could be having them come directly to you through some mobile business outreach initiative. And so we put money behind supporting them engaging with women, $2.7 million to be more specific. And we recognize that COVID impacted the resource providers and the small businesses. As you mentioned, I came into this role from entrepreneurship, and I myself was a resource provider, and we were impacted by COVID. And so making resources available to the organizations that support women is also a tangible thing, because these centers need to be able to stay open so that they could and can address the needs that women have through technical assistance and training. And then lastly, I'll share, when I say we, I mean this administration came into office, and I had the honor of joining this office under Administrator Guzman's leadership. We deployed nearly $500 billion in funds to support small businesses across the country. And it was an astronomical scale up of the Small Business Administration, unprecedented, has never happened before. When doing this, we realized that the first iterations of many of these programs were not making themselves as readily available to the smallest of small minority women, veteran rural businesses across the country. And so we transformed and changed that. We stood up programs like restaurants, where we provided a time frame where women in underrepresented communities could compete for opportunities to get access to the $22 billion in resources that were made available as grants to restaurants. And we're happy to say that billions of dollars have been invested into supporting women in women-owned businesses in their survival through the pandemic. And as we move into recovery, looking at things like access to capital disparities for women, or even creating programs and initiatives, which is a new area that we're endeavoring into, around childcare and the care economy, because we also know that women are primary caregivers for their community. And particularly when we're talking about women of color, they're the workers in this essential labor force space. And so what does it look like for them to be able to establish businesses that actually are able to give them a solid foundation and footing, as well as aid their communities? And so we have centers like in Connecticut with Fran and her partnership with the state of Connecticut on investing $2 million in women's small businesses that are in the child care community. So these are real, tangible ways that our office is engaging on a day-to-day basis with women entrepreneurs and the ecosystems that support them. And I want to say one other thing, because we've talked about my traditional, the traditional area that I have the honor of leading, which is the work of my office, the Women's Business Center Network. But one other program that I was really very honored to be able to co-design was the $100 million Community Navigator Pilot Program, which was a part of the American Rescue Plan. And that program funded 51 organizations across the country and funded their spokes for a total of nearly 500. And of those, 27 were focused on supporting women entrepreneurs and providing everything from technical assistance to culturally competent or linguistically connected services and offerings from accounting, bookkeeping, and legal to support small businesses through this pandemic or anything else that may come their way.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was so comprehensive and offered great insight into the work that you all are doing. As we close out this segment, and again, thank you so much for spending time with us today, Natalie, to share more about the great work you're doing. I just want to talk, because we're the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we have many businesses, small, medium, large, that are joining this conversation today. Can you talk a little bit about how you all are engaging the private sector and any opportunities you might see to really strengthen or deepen public-private partnerships to support and advance the work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the administrator recently established the Digital Alliance, which is a collaboration of a number of private sector organizations focused on providing more technological opportunities for small businesses. Basically, what we know is during COVID, if you weren't online, you were challenged. And companies like Meta and Comcast and Amazon and others are a part of this digital alliance to not only make their services more readily available to small businesses, but also to train and teach these small businesses on how to digitize their companies. Because again, we have to build COVID and recession proof businesses that allow you to have access to your customers anywhere you are and anywhere that they are. That's one. And two, I mentioned the Community Navigator Pilot Program. That was funded by Congress. It's stood up by the Small Business Administration, and it could be undergirded by the private sector. So, we designed this program, deployed these resources, and we'd love to continue to keep seeing this program move forward. And we realize that that's going to require a collaboration between the government, nonprofits, and the private sector community, understanding this collaboration and the ways in which these resource partners are supporting national networks and national communities across the country. And then lastly, I would say, our Women's Business Center networks, we have phenomenal leadership, and historically we know this. This is not something that's new to anyone. Women's organizations have been underfunded, and it's time for all of us to do what we can to ensure that women are being funded, their organizations are being funded, their businesses are being funded equitably, and that requires everyone to come to the table to make sure that that happens. Private sector, public sector, and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. I really appreciate you. And of course, I have to give you a quick shout out as a fellow Howard alumna, always proud to see the great work and impact we're having collectively. So on behalf of the Chamber, thank you. And we look forward to continuing this conversation. I mean, how you ended in terms of the importance of the private sector, public sector collaboration and partnership is, what we believe and want to make sure that we are leading in that space. So I'm going to move us to the next portion of our program, but thank you again. So I now want to move into the next piece of our conversation with another woman leader who is really helping to shape the future for businesses with a particular focus on financial inclusion and impact, especially as we think about minority and women-owned businesses. Latricia is Chief Executive Officer of Axion Opportunity Fund. She has spent her career in banking and financial services, particularly in underserved markets, and has won numerous awards for her leadership in this field. As an entrepreneur, she raised millions in capital to start her own business and really supported, Latinx consumers with little or no credit history. Today, she leads a network that is supporting small businesses across many different demographics. And I'm sure she's proud to be able to say that Axion has invested more than $500 million in its clients, 90% of whom are women, people of color, or immigrants. Luz, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Latricia. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Same. I am honored to have you as part of this dialogue. So again, I want to jump right in because I know, we have limited time and lots to talk about. To start, of course, I always want to context that. Can you talk about what is Axion Opportunity Fund and how do you all support women entrepreneurs as part of your larger mission?
Sure. So Axion Opportunity Fund, we are the leading nonprofit community development financial institution known as a CDFI, and we provide underinvested small business owners with affordable loans, coaching, and support networks to help them build and grow their businesses. As you mentioned, over 90% of the businesses that we work with are owned by people of color, women, and immigrants. And the unfortunate part is that these entrepreneurs have been left behind by the traditional financial systems for a variety of reasons, including lack of credit, not having, traditional documentation, their businesses being too small, not having enough time in business, on and on, and frankly, some systemic barriers. And so these entrepreneurs face significant challenges accessing affordable capital and the resources that they need in order to succeed. So our mission is to drive economic mobility by offering affordable, transparent financing and to help them raise, the resources, get the coaching, the business advising, the technical assistance that they need so they can, grow, they can thrive, and they can succeed in their businesses. And we are very focused, of course, of doing this for women-owned businesses, which we know are consistently left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And, hearing the work that you all are doing, you are clearly an important part of the ecosystem to support businesses, and particularly those who have been underserved traditionally. Access to capital and financial inclusion is obviously core to the work that you're doing, but I know there are so many ways that you all support traditionally underfunded entrepreneurs beyond lending. Can you speak to some of the other resources and programs that Axion has established to help entrepreneurs accelerate and, to your point, thrive?
Sure. So in addition to loan capital, AOF provides free technical assistance and educational resources to all small business owners, including those that are not borrowers of our organization. Our educational programming supports existing firms and budding businesses, particularly those owned and operated by women and entrepreneurs of color. In 2021, our 24/7 online business resource library attracted over 1 million visitors, and our direct programming reached nearly 5,000 entrepreneurs, and more than 65% of those participants identified themselves as women, and roughly 75% identified themselves as people of color. This includes our one-on-one coaching that provides very personalized business coaching. Last year, we helped close to 1,000 entrepreneurs, collaborating with nonprofits and corporate partners like Trust Plus, Sam Adams, DoorDash, and FedEx to address the individual needs of each business owner. The FedEx e-commerce learning lab, which we recently relaunched, is really a great program. It's a 5-month program designed for women and entrepreneurs of color who are looking to grow their businesses through online sales for the first time. And then selected participants get access to workshops, one-on-one coaching, and other, order fulfillment for their first online marketplace shop. And nearly 90% of the first cohorts that participated were women and or people of color. We also hold seminars and webinars. Last year, we held 30 webinars on relevant topics like how to access government COVID assistance, how to manage cash on hand during the pandemic. These webinars were attended by thousands of folks in 49 states. Again, most attendees, not surprising, identified themselves as women and entrepreneurs of color. And we do those in both English and Spanish for folks that, are limited in speaking English. So look, when it comes down to what resources small businesses need, we connect entrepreneurs with capital and educational resources and coaching, because we believe that the two combined is really what can have driving and lasting impact to drive economic mobility across the important community that are entrepreneurs.
Thank you. You just hit on something. So thank you for really laying out the work that you all are doing, which, to your point, access to capital is really important, but there are these other resources and supports that help to make the ecosystem work. You talked about 2021 being a year where you saw lots of growth and folks coming to the platform, needing support. It's no secret that we have been, dealing with a public health crisis, economic crisis, lots of other things, and the businesses that you support have disproportionately been affected in many different ways. As you think about, I know you all have also taken time to really innovate and think about how you're supporting these businesses. Can you share any lessons learned around what is working, what doesn't? You talked about those things that need to come together, but are there any specific things that you've seen that is really helping these businesses, again, not just sustain, but thrive and be able to grow and have the impact that they're looking to have for their communities?
Yeah, I have to say this, Latricia. I mean, I was really heartened last year to see the incredible amount of collaboration that happened between organizations that pre-pandemic would have been considered competitors. And it was spoken about earlier, these public-private sector partnerships. A key learning for us was that collaboration between the public and the private sector. The problem that we have to solve of access to capital and resources for underinvested small businesses is too big to solve for any one institution or industry to do it. So the public, the private, the nonprofit sector coming together is really where we saw some of the most successful small business relief efforts during the crisis, where CDFIs partnered to distribute loans and provide free technical assistance. So as an example, we partnered on several loan funds that were created with capital providers. So banks, impact investors, philanthropists, other CDFIs, attorneys, to launch these loan funds to provide up to $100,000 loans and free technical assistance. And the loans were at very low cost. And what this did is provided the resources that small businesses that really didn't get the support from the PPP program needed to rebuild and longer term. And it also gave us as CDFIs the holistic resources that we needed to access customers, to make sure customers knew we were there, get us the capital and the liquidity that we needed to lend, being able to help us mitigate some of the risk, because obviously with a lot of businesses shut down, not producing revenue, lenders had some concerns about, can we make these loans? And through these funds, we were able to provide a lot of those resources. I am very, very proud and excited to say that we raised over $320 million in private capital to leverage public funds from different state governments that participated in the program. And these funds have made loans to more than 3,300 small businesses through a network of 25 participating CDFIs in 18 states. 90% of the loans were made to businesses with less than 10 employees. And 65% of those loans went to businesses owned by women, Black, Hispanic, Asian, or Native-owned businesses. So again, the power of coming together, we see tremendous potential for these programs to help reshape the lending landscape for small businesses going forward and getting them the tools and resources that they need to rebuild.
That's amazing. And that's the impact that we want to hear about and see. And again, those lessons around partnership and collaboration between the private and public sector are really key to the work that we're trying to do here. So thank you for sharing that. As we close out this segment, and thank you again so much, Luz, for your insights. You are entrepreneur or former entrepreneur. I don't know how you couch it, but I feel like you were an entrepreneur, so always are. But you've worked tirelessly in your career to increase opportunity for historically underserved entrepreneurs. In your experience, what are one or two things that give you the most hope about the time we're in right now?
I believe that in times of crisis, like they say, don't let a good crisis go to waste. There is a lot of innovation created. And I talked about the public-private sector partnerships, but I think we're also seeing an increased recognition of the merit that women have to our community, right? They help create jobs. They build valuable goods and services. They bring economic vitality to our communities. And I think there's a recognition of what a difficult time we have accessing capital and growing our businesses, plain and simple. And so more individuals and more organizations that we speak with are more focused on helping close this gap this gap of women having access to capital, to the resources that they need, the disparity that has gone on for so many years, not getting approved for debt funding as the same pace as, male counterparts. So in essence, I think that there is a recognition that we need to support underserved communities, of which women play a key and significant role, and will continue, as in every other economic crisis we have, help to build and rebuild our economy back up.
Thank you, Luz. We appreciate you taking the time to be part of what we believe, and I know you feel the same, is a very important conversation. I am looking forward to the opportunities that we will have to continue to collaborate with Axion Opportunity Fund beyond today's conversation.
Thank you, Latricia, very much, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And now we'd like to share a message from a grantee of the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Coalition to Back Black Businesses.
We started and it was like, let's get people out there fishing. Let's get people out there camping. Let's do this. So those were our immediate goals, really just getting communities involved and people that look like us.
The Coalition to Back Black Businesses was really instrumental in helping Let's Go Outdoors make it through the pandemic.
This funding is going to really allow us to increase our capacity and to have an indoor space where we can offer programming year-round.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the Editor-in-Chief of CO by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That's the Chamber's platform for small businesses. I'm so excited to be here with you today. So we know that women-owned businesses have a significant impact on the U.S. economy, and yet they face obstacles like limited access to funding, contracts, networks, and mentorship programs. The good news, though, is that through the Chamber's Equality of Opportunity Initiative and similar efforts, we're seeing major progress in breaking down these barriers and accelerating the impact of female entrepreneurs. And that is what we're going to talk about today. So let me introduce our panelists today. We have Betsy Four, who is the co-founder of Tiny Organics, and Keisha Mays, who is president and CEO of Just Fearless and Her Story Made. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nat.
So I'm going to start with you, Keisha. First of all, tell us about your business. When did it start? Where are you based? And just tell us a little bit, like, what is one of the biggest lessons you've learned in launching your business so far?
Yes, so Just Fearless was started over 10 years ago and actually started overseas. And then once brought it back into the US, once I moved back to the US, it's a business development firm. I wanted to work with small and medium-sized companies, helping them to expand into new markets. And so I built my team around doing that. And then in doing that, it would still, one-to-one service in terms of working with company, business to business. And I still wanted to have a greater impact. And I had to figure out a way to do that. And that's where Her Story Connections came in as a platform to help female founders specifically to scale their business, get funding for their businesses, and to help at least 1 million female founders generate a minimum of $1 million in annual revenue by December 31st, 2025. So we've kind of evolved over the 10-year period, and I'm very excited about it.
That's great. And what about one of your lessons? What is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned since launching your business?
Failures, how we look at them. Failure to me is a lesson learned. I see myself as having either I'm going to win, or I'm going to learn a very valuable lesson. So I don't lose. So I think one of the biggest things for any entrepreneur, you're going to encounter those failures. I think if you look at them as lessons learned, they're a lot easier to absorb and not repeat them.
That's great. Betsy, same question for you. Tell us about Tiny Organics. How long have you been in business? Where are you based? And what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned?
Yeah, thanks so much. So honored to be here with you all. Tiny Organics was founded, and apologies for my voice. I'm struggling through a cold right now, but we were founded on the premise that, we could shape the palates of a generation away from sugary forward first foods for a baby and toddler to savory forward. So when you look at the U.S. market, it's been historically purees, right, which have been mainly fruit based. And when you look at that, it's like, and that's actually how I was raised, right? And I'm sure many many American children were raised. But when you look at the rest of the world, children are just eating real whole foods from the very first bites, right? And so we're really the only ones that have made it where it has to be, served in this way. And what we thought is, could there be a way that we could re-engineer children's bodies to actually prefer vegetables so that later in life it could reduce chronic diseases, obesity, and diabetes, right? All things that my family struggled with growing up on our reservation in North Dakota. I'm Turtle Mountain Chippewa, right? The North Star for my company is to get our product onto WIC, the food stamp for women, infant, and children that over half of babies in America are fed on. And, there's currently no option that's a vegetable forward, whole food, organic offering. And so for us, that is my mission, and the impact I hope to make. This is actually my third company. So I do have a lot of learnings that have come around along the way. And I would say, like, when you're first starting out, so for me, I didn't have kind of a friends and family around, if you will. There wasn't access, right? There wasn't that kind of opportunity within my community. And I think, what I did is actually went and got a $50K grant. And that was the very first start to now having raised over $20 million for my businesses. Couldn't have done that without that initial grant. And I think just taking every opportunity that you can to get something off the ground, and then being able to, it's only because of that, like $50K, that I had the launch pad to then be able to go forward and build these companies. And so for me, it's all about making that impact. And I loved what Keisha said as well around like the failures. Oh my goodness, I resonate with that. I think, for me, one of the biggest learnings was just in the first company I built, and for the first 8 years, I was a sole founder, and it is so much harder to kind of go it alone, right? And we know this. And I always say I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. That includes my ancestors for certain. For me, it's about, how can you get those folks around the table who kind of fill in the gaps, right? For all the expertise that you're going to lack, especially as a first-time founder. And the way that I went about that is to build out a really big advisory board from the beginning. I mean, there's this saying, I'm sure we've heard it, but if you want money, ask for advice, right? If you want advice, ask for money. So, I think when you get this advisory board around you, it just gives you the wings that you need to be able to open up the network, to say, hey, I'm here and I'm trying to make an impact and a difference. And I think that there's so much you can do by just getting really creative early on, right? Which women historically have just been brilliant at, trying to get super creative and build from the heart, right from the start. So I'll leave it there for now.
That's great. Thank you. And some great advice in there. So Keisha, let's talk. You said your business has been in business for a long time.
Yes.
So tell us about, so we're talking about how to found your business and how to finance that. But then once the business is started, you need to be consistently growing your business. So can you tell us about that? What are some of the mechanisms and strategies you've put in place for accelerating the growth of your business over these last years?
Just Fearless wasn't my first company, but it was the company that actually I was able to scale and, take it to the next level. A lot of that came from bootstrapping. We're all familiar with bootstrapping, using your credit card, savings, whatever you have to start, because as we know, the biggest issue for a lot of female founders is getting funding. And when I started, it wasn't really there, and there weren't like grant options or things like that if they weren't really readily available or highly promoted. So it's really on me to reinvest every dollar I made back into the business, pulling in more clients. How did I do that? Joining different organizations. Like my company is a member of the UN Global Compact. And that was, basically agreeing that no matter what country we did business in, we would, follow fair trade practices and making sure that we're not violating international treaties and anything like that. And that opened other doors for me into other organizations like She Trades and, just other associations overseas, and allowed me to go into Hong Kong and go into the Middle East. And it kind of networking. So I guess at the end of the day, it's networking that helped to open other doors. Also getting press for my business and featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes. These different aspects open doors. So when I didn't quote unquote have the funding, I got resourceful. And that kind of helped propel the business and scale it so that I could do the things I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's funny because so far both of you have basically talked about resourcefulness, which I feel like is a theme that we hear from so many women-led businesses. Betsy, I'm going to ask you the same thing. You mentioned raising $20 million. Can you just talk about some of the strategies behind that accelerated growth and how you've gone about that?
I think it's exactly what Keisha said. I thought that was just brilliantly said, where, you know, that network effect that you're building, it's a domino, right? Where it's like, okay, you can kind of get that first believer, and that's what these folks are, right? They're not investors necessarily in the VC world anyway. It's like they can be your believers, right? They can be in your team, in your corner, kind of helping you build these businesses. And I think, you know, when I founded my first company that I mentioned before, I went down a very different road. I went with individual investors once after I got that grant, right? Was then able to raise millions with that. But where I went differently with Tiny Organics is I went the VC road right out the gate. And I think when you don't know or necessarily have access to that, it gets a bit tricky, but there's funds that are popping up everywhere now. That are focused on women and honestly minorities as well. So my board member for the past 2 years, Samara Hernandez of Chingona Ventures, she's the first Latina woman to ever found a fund as a sole general partner. She's raised over 50 million on her own. She's an absolute inspiration. And you know, there's funds like this popping up all over. So actually, I've just been asked to be an investment partner at one called X Factor Ventures in Boston. It's women funding women, right? You know, there's resources now that I just didn't have access to a decade ago when I was building my first company. Honestly, I was always the only woman in the room, right? It was a tech company. And it was just, you know, there was hardly any women like, you know, in venture capital at all at that time, right? And so I think maybe one of the reasons why I went down sort of, okay, get the angels in, get the, you know, kind of individuals that really believe. But what I found through this journey of going through the venture capital road is like, you can find like folks like Samara who are so mission aligned, and you know, her son Santiago and my son Sebastian are best friends now, and they, you know, they both grew up on Tiny, right? So they like basically built the company with us. You know, our sons got to test all this food too. So I think that when women are investing in women, it's like a different understanding of the problem, right, that you're trying to solve, that allows you to be more intentional in the way that you're going about it. So I think, you know, just when you're looking for funding, or you know, you're reaching out to folks, and definitely feel free to, you know, reach out to me if there's anyone in my network and there's an entrepreneur on this call, because I think, you know, those warm intros, yes, but less and less funds are requiring that now, right? Because they see that there's such a lack of funding out there, and we just need to build in more opportunities. So I think, you know, for me, it was a really long road. We're talking over a decade, you know, to get to those millions, and you know, ultimately, it is based a lot on the growth of the company, you know, the traction that you're picking up and getting, and then it's that domino effect. It's kind of like that track record that you're building on from there, and of course, the reputation. Just like with investors, right? It's all about reputation, and you know, I think like you know, just referencing Samara again, I think like, you know, with her building this reputation of funding really entrepreneurs that wouldn't have any kind of access, right, like prior, and coming with them along the journey from the very first days, to, you know, someone that says like, hey, I see you, right, and I've been there, and I think that's just totally different, right? And we're now getting there. I loved the conversation right before this too, where I do think things are changing, and I know we'll get into that a little bit later in the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And so thank you for that, Betsy. And so Keisha, kind of the same, you know, Betsy just talked about some of the challenges of being a woman-owned business, and, you know, needing to network, and some of the challenges of finding funding. Can you be specific, Keisha, in terms of some of the challenges you face that you think are specific to being a woman-owned business?
I think Betsy touched on that, and I think also Lou touched on that, the funding access. I mean, now there's definitely more fund opportunities. I have my own fund. I invest in women-owned businesses, but we're talking a decade ago. Both Betsy and I started over a decade ago. It wasn't the same feel. Like you got an introduction to a VC firm, but you weren't giving the same time frame. So I think as far as what's changed, or what has been to what is coming, is the opportunity. The people are starting to see the value, the returns. If you ever watch Shark Tank, you often hear Kevin Leary say that his best performing businesses are those that are run and operated by women. And so he takes a hard edge to focus more on that in his investments, and not just him, other sharks as well. And I think the biggest thing that we can take from that, and I'm hoping that getting back to answering your question, is women, we are multifaceted. We can run businesses, run homes, run families, do everything all at once and make it look good no matter how stressed we are. So I think the funding aspect is opening up. Doors are opening up in terms of VC firms, angel funds. I might consider my fund an angel fund, and giving opportunity and publicizing it, and and making it so that you can invest at seed round, not just when you're already like on uber unicorn level or an established level, but also get it in when you're just getting started as well. Kind of hope that answered it.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Betsy, there will be women watching today who are just at the very beginning of having a business idea. They're creating their pitch deck, but there's also women who are watching who are already in business and trying to scale. So I would like to make sure that we leave our audience today with some tangible takeaways. So can you, what's your best advice that you could offer to women and all entrepreneurs, but women entrepreneurs in particular, about how to strategize to get to whatever that next milestone is for them, like how to stay focused on that?
Yep, absolutely. I think for myself, what's served me in my journey is just being at the heart of the consumer, right? So with Tiny Organics, I founded it with 100 founding families in Brooklyn. Those moms actually, they wrote our entire product roadmap for us, right? It's the reason we went plastic free out the gate, right? We're vegan, and all the recipes that we created was for their children, and they had tested 5 different versions of each. I will say, to get to that point, it is about building that minimum viable product, right? In any way that or are able to, right? Because my last company was a hardware company. I was a toy inventor prior to that, right? I had to figure out how to hack a Fitbit to be able to put it on my dog's collar to track his activity. And I was super resourceful. So I went out, and I didn't have any money, right? Like no funding at the time, but I went to hackathons on weekends where these coders were all these developers were, and I basically found someone who I was able to convince around this idea that I'd had, and then they came in and actually built the software to come alongside my hardware and build it just from a perspective of I'm so excited about this. I think there's a big vision here, right? And of course, like trying to attach some kind of equity to it, even though I wasn't even incorporated at the time, right? And so I think like there's a lot you can do just through your own passion and drive of thinking, I can't not do this. I have to solve this problem. But I think that it's about getting really specific about that problem you're solving and that customer, right, that you're building for, because it definitely helps if you are the customer, right? If you experience that pain point in your own life, you can build in kind of a different way of having that mindset, and especially when you're talking about it to other collaborators that could become co-founders or to investors down the line as well. But at the heart of all of it is just this passion within you that keeps you up at night. That you're like, I have to do this, and that is what will push you forward, and that is why you will get funded, right? And especially in these earliest days of like, the funding is really about the team and the dream, right? In the very beginning. And so when we look at it that way, you're really looking for the person who's like willing to do whatever it takes. And what I would always tell myself is, I've got nothing to lose. Why don't I put myself out there? I'm going to knock on these doors and ask if they want to, be a founding family of my company that doesn't exist yet. Here, I'm going to hand them an unmarked, thing of food, right? That I've made. And I think, what was so eye-opening about that whole journey is like, folks want to help, right? Like they want to feel like, oh, that would be so amazing to be a part of a company. Like something I do when I advise the companies I work with is to create your version of a founding family, right? Whatever that looks like the founding team, if you will, of customers that have come alongside you, right, to build this. Because I think that's just going to inform the whole process and save you a lot of heartache in the long run if you're building something that actually isn't beneficial or desirable in a way, right? And you get too far down a road. So I think like bringing those believers along with you from the very beginning.
Yes, thank you. I think that's very good advice. And Keisha, I'm going to ask you that same question as we wrap up. What is your advice? You've been in growth mode for a long time. What is your advice to an entrepreneur about how to stay focused on achieving whatever that next milestone is for them, and not getting lost in the big picture?
I would think it's two things. One, resourcefulness, because at the end of the day, it's, you can have the greatest work ethic, the greatest idea, or Betsy mentioned the minimum viable product, but if you're not resourceful in a way to find a way to make it happen. I always compare an entrepreneur as someone who jumps off of a cliff and builds either a parachute or an airplane on the way down. And so you're taking a risk on yourself. So at this end of the day, do whatever it takes. There's an example where some of you may have heard of Fashion Nova. It's a fashion line that is, highly popular, billion-dollar business owned by a man, and he created, and it's, a lot of the Black and brown consumers, invest a great deal amount of money into it. There's another company that's similar, that's woman-owned, InStyle Boutique, and I have watched the owner. She is phenomenal. She puts in the work hours. She is resourceful. She uses social media to the absolute maximum, sweat equity, and has built her own brand off of her resourcefulness, off of her sweat equity, her hard work, and doing it on her own. I don't think that she has funding, but I think, she's built a phenomenal brand. And my thing would be for even consumers, in the same way that we support, a Fashion Nova, we should be supporting these companies with our dollars who have the minimum viable product, who are on social media, using their websites. Support them in that same aspect. So even if we support as funders, I support and invest in women-owned companies. Betsy does as well. Our consumers also need to get involved in that aspect and, search out for those companies that are women-owned and support them in the same way that we would want the support from funders, VC firms, or angel funds, or whoever that might be.
That is a great place to end it. That is excellent advice from both of you. I can't thank you enough. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I thank you, and I thank the audience for joining us as well. We look forward to continuing this conversation and partnering with all of you to advance some of the ideas and solutions we talked about today. Now we'll hear from a grantee from the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Coalition to Back Black Business. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you for having me.
Every part of my life has kind of prepared me for where we are today. Hope Pharmacy stands for helping others physically prosper every day. When the pandemic hit, we had to find ways to be creative and to pivot. And there were moments when I felt discouraged. But the Coalition for Backing Black Businesses has helped us tremendously here at Hope Pharmacy. We've been able to utilize the funds to help with payroll, inventory, and now with expansion.
Senior Director of Strategic Alliances and Outreach at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Many thanks to our speakers and panelists for sharing their insights and providing tangible takeaways to support and improve women entrepreneurship. According to the American Express State of Women-Owned Business in 2019, women of color amount for 50% of women-owned businesses and generate $422.5 billion in revenue. Women's entrepreneurship is a fundamental factor of an inclusive and global economy. And as we learned today, private and public sector leaders are working together to close the opportunity gaps that currently exist for women entrepreneurs, especially those of color. The U.S. Chamber's Equality of Opportunity Initiative is guided by data, informed by conversations with business, government, and community leaders, and advances public and private sector solutions to help close opportunity gaps. To learn more, visit our website at uschamber.com/EOI.